Okay, let's jump right into the deep end. Today, we are cracking open the really complex world of Indian finance. Specifically, we're looking at the high bar set for anyone who dares to give you investment advice. We've got a stack of intense legal sources, and we're going to distill them into, the critical protections and ethical rules that keep the financial markets fair.
It's such an important mission because when you trust someone with your savings, with your future, you need to know what guardrails are in place. What we're really looking at is the robust system designed by the Securities and Exchange Board of India SEBI. It's all there to protect millions of investors and make sure that market integrity isn't just a suggestion, but a hard rule.
Right. And to make this easier to visualize, there's a great analogy in our source material. Think of the Indian financial market like a high stakes professional game. To keep it fair, you need two things: a referee and a detailed rule book.
Precisely. And that rule book, it really starts with two foundational laws. First, you have the Securities Contracts Regulation Act of 1956, or SCRA. This is the old one, the foundation. Its main objective is just to prevent, undesirable transactions in securities by regulating the whole business of dealing in them. SCRA basically defines the playing field. It gives jurisdiction over stock exchanges and sets the standards for listing securities.
So SCRA builds the stadium, and then the powerful referee steps in to call the plays. And that's SEBI.
That's absolutely right. The SEBI Act of 1992 established the board for one main reason: to protect your interests as an investor, and of course to promote market development and regulate every single participant. SEBI's authority is just vast. It registers and oversees all the market intermediaries, so your brokers, the investment advisors we're focusing on, and it even regulates huge things like depositories and collective investment schemes, like venture capital funds and mutual funds. SEBI is the enforcement arm. It can inspect books, conduct research, and levy fees to make sure everyone is playing by the rules.
Okay, so we have the rule book and the referee. Let's get into the hard rules SEBI uses to stop the cheats and keep the game fair. Starting with the big ones: fraud and insider trading.
This is where SEBI gets very explicit. It's mostly codified in the SEBI Prevention of Fraudulent and Unfair Trade Practices Regulations of 2003. And these rules, they define fraud in an incredibly broad way. It covers any act, expression, omission, or concealment if it was done to induce another person to deal in securities.
And I think the most crucial insight here for you, the listener, is this: it doesn't even matter if the person committing the fraud actually made money. A wrongful gain or avoiding a loss is totally inconsequential. It's the intent that matters.
Exactly. It's a definition focused on the integrity of what was said, not just the financial result. The list of things they prohibit goes way beyond just, pyramid schemes. It prohibits a willful misrepresentation of the truth, of course, but also subtle things like making a suggestion of a fact that you don't believe is true, or even a promise made without any intention of performing it.
That's an incredibly high ethical standard. It almost sounds like being careless is just as bad as being malicious.
It is, even a representation made in a reckless and careless manner. It doesn't matter if it turns out to be false or true. It qualifies as fraud if the intent was to mislead. SEBI is demanding a profound level of diligence in every single piece of market communication.
Okay, now let's talk about the one thing that can just shatter market confidence: insider trading.
Right. Insider trading is banned because it's dealing based on unpublished price-sensitive information, or UPSI. This is stuff that, if it got out, would almost certainly move the stock price, giving insiders, they call them connected persons, an undue advantage based on this secret information. It just destroys market integrity. It kills the average investor's faith in fairness.
That's the core of it, isn't it? If you think the game is rigged, you just stop playing.
Exactly. And SEBI requires all intermediaries, like investment advisors, to implement these strict, systemic fair conduct policies. It's all to prevent the leakage and misuse of this information. The overall message is just crystal clear. Intermediaries must have high standards of integrity, fairness, and professionalism. They're explicitly prohibited from acting in collusion with others to hurt investors. And there's even a mundane but critical rule that they have to be prompt in dispersing income, like dividends or interest, to clients. It's all about putting the client first.
Okay, so we've set this high ethical bar to stop fraud. But how does SEBI make sure that translates into actual practice when someone is managing your money? That brings us to the coach, the investment advisor, or IA, and their very specific rule book.
Right. The Investment Advisor Regulation of 2013 is where the rubber meets the road. It defines investment advice very specifically. It's advice on investing in, purchasing, or selling securities. And importantly, it also includes comprehensive financial planning, analyzing a client situation, their goals, their strategies.
That feels pretty broad, but what's not included? Because we all see a ton of financial chatter out there that isn't formal advice.
And there are crucial exclusions for that reason,
Yeah.
to protect journalism and public commentary. So advice in widely available newspapers or magazines are just simple, generalized market commentary and trading calls.
Hmm.
That's all explicitly excluded. But if you're talking about specific securities for a specific client for a fee, well, that's when SEBI demands registration.
And SEBI is not messing around here. If you're an IA and you're getting paid for consideration, you absolutely must have a certificate of registration from SEBI. It's non-negotiable.
And the requirements are designed to be a huge barrier to entry. They only want serious, well-capitalized firms. A non-individual IA, so a corporate entity, must have a net worth of 5 crore rupees. That's about 50 million Indian rupees. So we're approaching something like $600,000 USD.
Yeah.
SEBI is essentially saying, we only want stable, committed firms advising investors.
Wow. That's a massive structural commitment. It fundamentally changes who can even enter the market, which I guess is a powerful consumer protection tool.
It is. And they also have to put the words investment advisor right there in their official name. No hiding what they do.
What about exemptions? I know some professionals, like lawyers or accountants, might give financial advice as part of their main job.
Yes, certain professionals are exempt, but only if the advice is incidental to their primary professional service. So this includes stockbrokers, advocates, and members of professional bodies, like the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. If a chartered accountant gives some investment insight while doing an audit, that's generally okay. But the second they start marketing a dedicated advisory practice, they have to register.
So it's about scope creep. If you start acting like an IA, you have to play by the IA rules. Okay, what about the people themselves? The qualifications?
The bar is exceptionally high. An individual IA needs either a professional qualification or a minimum 2-year postgraduate degree or diploma in a field like finance or economics. And the sources specifically call out that holding a CFA charter from the CFA Institute also meets this requirement.
It's fascinating. SEBI is basically dictating who is competent enough. They're not leaving it to chance.
And that standard trickles down to the team. Even the employees who give advice, the persons associated with investment advice or PDIAs, they have to hold at least a graduate degree in any discipline. And crucially, both the IAs and their PDIAs have to hold the relevant NAISM certification. These are specific exams for advisory services, and they have to keep renewing them. It's a double lock, a high academic bar and a market-specific certification.
This foundation of high capital and proven competence, it leads us right to the core ethical requirement. The IA has to act in a fiduciary capacity. What rules make sure they actually put the client first and not their own wallet?
Fiduciary duty just means the IA must act in the best interest of their clients, period. If any conflict comes up, they have to disclose it. But SEBI goes a step further to just eliminate the potential for conflict with the zero commission rule.
This is the real game changer, isn't it? They can't get paid by the company whose product they're recommending.
Exactly. An IA shall not receive any consideration, no commissions, no referral fees, no kickbacks from anyone other than the client they're advising. This policy just fundamentally changes the IA from a product salesperson, which caused decades of mis-selling, into a pure fiduciary. Their only paycheck depends on the client's success. Plus, corporate IAs have to keep their advisory business totally separate, operationally and financially, from any other business they might have.
That separation is so key for trust. Okay, let's talk about a rule that sounds almost restrictive but is there to prevent front-running, the trading against advice ban.
This is a serious protection. To stop an IA from, say, giving advice to move the market and then profiting personally, the IA is banned from making a trade on their own account that is contrary to advice given to clients. And that ban lasts for 15 days.
Wait, a full 15 days? Doesn't that really tie the IA's hands for their own portfolio, even if they had no bad intent?
It does. But that's the price of absolute fiduciary trust. You put the client's interests so far first that it delays your own trading. Now, if the market shifts dramatically and the IA thinks the advice needs to be changed, they can lift the ban, but only if they give a revised assessment to the client at least 24 hours in advance. It's a major cooling-off period designed for total transparency.
And all of this is built on one core idea: suitability. The advice has to fit the person.
It's non-negotiable. Before any advice is given, the IA must perform mandatory risk profiling. This is a deep dive into the client's finances, looking at their capacity for absorbing loss, what they can objectively afford to lose, and their unwillingness to accept risk, which is more psychological. The final advice has to be demonstrably appropriate to that client's risk profile. And on top of that, IEAs have to advise clients on direct plans of products wherever they're available, which are the non-commissioned versions.
It's clear the regulator demands human responsibility. But what happens when the advice is generated by, a machine learning model, an AI?
Even with complex tech, the obligation is the same. SEBI's rule is simple. The IA is solely responsible for the security, integrity, and, most importantly, the advice generated by AI tools used for clients. You use the algorithm, you own the output. You can't pass the buck to the machine.
And what about the nuts and bolts, the compliance details for fees and transparency?
The rules for handling money are very strict. All fees have to come through banking channels only. No cash. Advance fees are capped. They can't exceed fees for a period of 1 year. They also have restrictions on offering free trials. And for public accountability, IAs must display their complaint status right on their website, so you can see the track record before you sign up.
So if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, what other laws intersect with what SEBI is doing, especially around, say, money laundering?
Oh, we absolutely have to talk about the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or PMLA. SEBI-registered intermediaries are reporting entities, so they have to follow rigorous anti-money laundering guidelines. Money laundering here means trying to assist in any process connected with the proceeds of crime.
So the investment advisor suddenly becomes a gatekeeper for the whole financial system. They're on the front lines trying to spot illicit funds.
That's the perfect way to frame it. It requires what they call enhanced due diligence. IAs have to verify a client's identity, often using digital authentication like Aadhaar, and they have to examine the client's financial position before allowing big transactions. And this part is critical. If the client fails to comply with these PMLA requirements, say they won't reveal the source of funds, the transaction shall not be allowed. The gate just slams shut.
That's a huge compliance burden, but you can see why it's necessary. What about just internal record keeping for SEBI's own audits?
Well, beyond the 5-year record keeping for AML, IAs have to keep all other records for at least 5 years. And here's a detail that shows how serious SEBI is about forensic audits. The rationale for arriving at investment advice has to be signed, dated, and kept. If the records are electronic, they shall be digitally signed. This means every email, every note is discoverable. It forces a level of accountability that's just immense. And a yearly compliance audit by an outside professional is also mandatory.
And if an IA breaks any of these rules, what happens then?
The penalties are swift and severe. For a default, they start at not less than 1 lakh rupees and they can go all the way up to 1 crore rupees maximum. Now, if an IA feels a SEBI order is unfair, they can appeal to the Securities Appellate Tribunal or SAT. So there is an appeals process. We also noted other relevant laws like FEMA 1999 for foreign exchange and the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016. So to summarize the huge amount we've covered, the Indian regulatory structure led by SEBI, it really operates on this principle of absolute investor protection. It mandates a strict fiduciary duty, it's backed by high qualifications, mandatory risk profiling, and these huge capital thresholds like the 5 crore net worth rule. The entire goal is to enforce transparency and suitability to shift the whole advisory world from a sales model to a pure service model.
So what does this all mean for you? We've seen the sheer depth of regulation, from banning commissions to that 15-day waiting period before an IA can trade against their own advice. This environment, it creates a powerful expectation of trust and professionalism. But let's end with a provocative thought. We know the IA is solely responsible for the output of any AI tools they use. Given SEBI's incredibly strict definitions of connected person and unpublished price-sensitive information, how is the regulator going to handle a future where an advanced AI one that can process mountains of data instantly might become the source of market-moving information? What happens when the AI is effectively the connected person with UPSI and who's responsible for monitoring the AI's dealings in real time?
That opens up a whole new, very complex world of regulatory challenges for SEBI, where the idea of intent gets a lot murkier.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into India's financial referee and the investment advisor rulebook.
Until next time, stay well informed.